Welcome to the IVM Podcast Network.
IVM Likes is an IVM production, and if you enjoy listening to our pop culture discussion, you should check out our brand new show, Bollywood Scene Stealers. Hosted by journalist Indu Mirani, who sits down to chat with Bollywood's most famous character actors like Ranveer Shori, Satish Kaushik, Gulshan Grover and more. Episodes are out every Monday. Check it out. If you're a listener of IVM Likes and a socks fan, which I'm sure is a Venn diagram that's totally possible, I have great news for you. You check out the Moja Club. They make amazing funky socks that you can buy on their website. Or even better, just get a subscription. Sign up for 6 months or a year and you'll get a pair delivered to your house every month. They'll even throw in a free pair at the end of the month. And if you go to their website, themojaclub.in right now, you get a whole 33% off by just applying the code IVM Likes. It's IVM Likes with no spaces. 33% off. Did you hear that? Themojaclub.in.
Okay, hello and welcome everyone to an all-new episode of IVM Likes. Here in the studio with me is Josh. Hello. And I also have Abbas with me in the studio. And today is an all-new day of recommendations. And we'll also talk about our favorite book to movie adaptations and whether they are really that good in hindsight. So let's go with our first round of recommendations. Josh is recommending a movie.
Today my recommendation is going to be a film called Kamatti Padam. Not Kamatipura, as everyone keeps thinking. But so this film is a Malayalam gangster movie made by a cinematographer called Rajiv Ravi. He's directed this film. And the basic premise of the story is there is a sort of Kamatti Padam is a slum area in Ernakulam city in Kochi. So the story is basically, it's about essentially about gentrification, but it's about how these gangsters that ask people to move out from their houses so that, builders can take it over. And so that's the basic essence of the story. But the story, it's told in flashback, which is for some people a sin, but the narrative is essentially non-linear. And what's interesting is there are two characters who are sort of childhood friends, and one is coming back to see his friend because he has given him a random call and he doesn't know what he's heard on the phone. So he's trying to investigate what exactly it was heard. And through that whole finding out what happened, you find out the whole story of how they grew up, how they became gangsters, and just that whole story arc. And what is really cool also about this, or interesting about this gangster film, I think, is there are no guns in it. Okay. It is these gangsters are quite. They only use knives because I guess they don't have the money to to invest in guns or whatever. So everybody has knives and all the action is like with knives and everything, and it's quite brutal in parts. But the person who's made it this is his third film. He's worked as a cinematographer on a number of films with Anurag Kashyap. I think he shot Gangs of Wasseypur. He shot Devdi also, and he had also shot a film called Liar's Dice.
So is this a fairly new film?
Yeah, it came out last year.
Okay. So is this a film where you're supposed to, let's say, side with the gangsters, or like you have to be fairly ambiguous?
So yeah, in this case you do, the protagonists are essentially these gangsters.
Right.
Because the whole thing is midway through they feel guilty about it.
Okay.
And then the whole ending is like a confrontation.
Now you spoiled it for us.
Believe me, this film is not spoiled for you. Because the amazing thing about Rajiv Ravi is how he tells his stories, man. Because most of it is just purely montage. He had made this other film which is sort of like a Romeo and Juliet story called Anayam Rasulam. And that is a film where you don't even have to know what they're saying. You can just watch it because it's just told through action and scenes, and it's just his storytelling technique is.
So you've been watching a lot of these Malayalam movies on Hotstar.
Yes. Which all these films are free to watch on Hotstar. You don't even have to have an account or premium or anything. You don't even have to have a free.
So you made an observation about Bengali films on Hotstar.
Yeah, for some reason all the Malayalam regional films are free to watch. Even Marathi films, Tamil films, but the Bengali films are all premium. Why is this? I would like to know.
Because I think they assumed that the Bengalis will pay for the premium. Because the stereotype, I don't know if you're going to call it that, is that Bengalis will pay for good art.
Well, I don't want to play into any stereotypes, but if any of the listeners have any idea of why, please.
Yeah, write to us.
Yeah.
Find us on Facebook and write to us.
Yeah. If you want to defend or refute this claim, do get in touch with us.
Cool. All right, that was Josh's recommendation, and now we move on to Abbas.
That's right. So I'm going to be recommending a book. The book I'm recommending is a non-fiction book. It's called The Siege of Mecca. So in 1979, there was an event that took place, a terrorist act that took place, where a terrorist by the name of Juhayman al-Utaybi actually took the holy city of Mecca, the holy shrine where everybody goes to pray. He took hostages there. He, with a bunch of other terrorists, basically barged in the central mosque and He, with a bunch of other extremists, they barged in and they took hostage to all the worshippers who were there. Now, the interesting thing about that is because this event took place in Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia is so very, strict about what they let out in their history books and into the world, there is very little information about this particular incident. Many people don't even know that this happened. So this book is written by a journalist called Yaroslav Trofimov, who's actually a Middle East expert. He's been covering the Middle East for many years, and he's gone to great lengths to actually decode how it happened, why it happened. And that's the interesting thing, that yes, the central quote-unquote plot of the book is the terrorist incident that happened where the people were taken hostage, but then he covers how exactly these people were radicalized, how Saudi Arabia was before they discovered oil, how everything changed after they discovered oil, how overnight the people who were the royal family and the people who were running the government of Saudi Arabia overnight were rolling around in dollars, and everything changed, and how that kind of made the poorer sections of Saudi Arabia push towards extremism, how the religiosity became even more extreme as they went along while the country was getting more and more rich. So this particular incident that happened in 1979 is kind of the spark point to what would happen few years later, how the Al-Qaeda was formed, how the extremists from parts of Egypt and other Middle Eastern country kind of came together to give this particular incident a boost, and how the funding came about, and some of the more ridiculous aspects, like, so non-Muslims were not allowed to go into this particular area, right? So even if Saudi Arabia had to call army from the US or the UK, they had to change their religion before they actually went out to actually help the hostages. So it's little things like those, and how the politics was playing behind while this hostage situation was going on. There were, I think, about for 3 days they held the people hostage. So it's told in a very thrilling fashion because it's an incident like that, but in the background the writer also fills you up on the political and religious aspects of how this shaped what we now know as global terrorism, and which is
so it's like well researched.
It's very well researched. That's what
the starting point essentially that
exactly. And he also peppers it with little tidbits, like one of the compounds in the Grand Mosque was actually made by Osama bin Laden's brother, like he was a contractor there.
Wow.
So there may be some links with the bin Ladens and little trivia here and there. So that's what I'm saying. For an incident that has been very vehemently been kept under wraps by the Saudi government, this writer actually goes and uncovers it in great detail. So like I said, there's the incident that took place, there's almost like a day by day account of that, and of course there is the other aspect of how it gave rise to how aggressive the Saudi government is and how we are in a place where we are today. So The Siege of Mecca is the title of the book. It's written by Yaroslav Trofimov. So please read it if you get a chance.
Also, like you mentioned bin Laden, and that's interesting because according to many people, 9/11 never happened.
God.
So and I bring this up because Josh does not believe in that conspiracy. I believe to an extent.
Never happened, as in it was an inside job.
The inside job, yeah. As in it happened, but it was not bin Laden was directly responsible for it. And then whatever happened after that, the SEALs going and killing him also is just like a overplayed, dramatized way. We won't get into that, but I'm just bring this up.
Let me just bring this to an end right now, man. Does anybody knows who was in the World Trade Center? Which companies were in the World Trade Center when that thing hit? Do you know who had their offices in the World Trade? Just look up list of offices in the World Trade Center and tell me whether America would ever bomb the World Trade Center, man. You just look up the list of offices.
I'm not instigating the conspiracy. Why are you getting angry at me?
I'm just saying, like, just to kill it.
Cool. Don't kill it. The conspiracy will
I
be
want
alive.
to kill the dreams of all conspiracy theorists.
Okay.
Anyways, moving on. Speaking of another conspiracy theory, I recently watched this documentary called The Keepers on Netflix, and it goes right in my vein of thinking because I'm a massive critique of the Catholic Church and how it's covering its tracks for years now. And having grown up Catholic, I know how suffocated it is to be in that kind of environment. So the story of The Keepers is about these little girls who are studying at a convent school called the Archbishop Keogh in Pennsylvania. And they all talk about this wonderful nun who came to teach them in their junior high school. And she was the best nun ever until they reached the senior year, and then she was murdered. Her name was Kathy Sesnick, and she just vanished overnight and nobody could find her. At the same time, another girl from like 2 blocks away also died, and she was also abducted. So people were wondering if there's a serial killer on the loose. But as the years progressed, the cases both died. There was no victim. There was no murderer or no evidence found in both cases. So the cases went cold. Until 45 years later, when one of the girls from the school came out saying the priest who was kind of the counselor there, he was molesting us for years. And she said, I'm not the only, I don't know if I'm the only one, but I went through that. And there was like a lot of torture that she kind of repressed in her memories and got married and everything. Then it all came out. So when she spoke about this, she said that the nun knew about this whole abuse situation. So the priest became the first culprit, right? So like they started investigating him. And what's beautiful about the whole documentary is that despite it being 40-50 years since that incident happened, there are some girls, some students of hers that are still carrying on the investigation even after the cops, the FBI gave up. And they bring up so many hard evidences that were like really in your face. The girl, one who was actually abused the most, she came out and said that the priest actually took her to the dead body and she wiped maggots off her face, but no one did anything about it. Like, they would not believe her. And then there are so many cases where like the Catholic Church and FBI suffocated evidences, trails just go missing. Like, it's just like how to cover up one murder case. Like, that was not one murder case, right? Because the whole of Catholic Church's hypocrisy would come tumbling down. And if you watch Spotlight, if you watch any of the documentaries that surround this controversy, you know that it goes all the way to the Vatican. It's not even like a trivial thing. So you can see the machinery that is in power trying to suffocate this one small case, and it's very hard.
Or just that they have the machinery in place to cover it up.
Cover it up, yeah.
Because
The
they've
way
been doing
that,
it so
exactly.
And I've seen 2 episodes of this. What I liked was they hook you in with the murder mystery aspect of it, and then they slowly reveal the bigger conspiracy that might be at play. So I think that's a very good storytelling tool, that just on a human level you get invested with the murder mystery aspect of it.
Yeah, and there's some scenes that are just downright scary as I'm not even kidding. I was watching this with our friend Kabir Chandra, and we were watching it on his big screen. And so the priest was not only the suspect in the case, there were 2 other people. And so like these are very uncanny stories about how these people were involved in this. And like these people are crazy. And there's one camera which is basically gorilla capturing the guy who's like now 70 years old, and like he's still weird and on the edge. So one of these guys who was the suspect, he kept on repeating about how he he's like, I can't live with my consciousness, I'm going crazy, and he would take a lot of drugs and keep screaming about his woman in the attic. So the mother of the guy, she's like, who is this woman in the attic? So she just goes to the attic to check, and there's a mannequin with a nun's costume on it, with like silhouette, and that scared the hell out of me. Like, that's very creepy because the whole murder mystery is about a nun, and he keeps seeing this vision, which is actually a mannequin in the attic. So yeah, it's pretty well shot, pretty well researched. The case is still cold as of now. There's no spoiler there, but then you get to see how the American judiciary or the American crime system or the American religious system they're all in toes with each other to cover each other's tracks, and that's mind-blowing that they would go to that extent. Instead of just throwing the priest out, And the last episode like really shows the bottom line of how stupid it is, like how superficial all of it is. Like, they've been saying all of these things, but then it all gets turned around when you know what's happened in the last episode. But just watch it for that. So The Keepers is a great documentary. Ryan White is the director, and kudos to all the women who spoke about it on film, man. That takes a lot of courage. And like, there are some people who are ready to tell them that, repressed memories is not a real thing. You can't just, because you were so young and you were 14 and you were impressionable, so you enjoyed it. Like, that becomes the first thing that you do. People blame the victim, saying, you did not say anything for a year, so maybe you had intimacy with the abuser, and now you're just trying to revenge and take money out of it. So that's the tone the Catholic Church took, right? So that's the whole thing. All right, that's our round of recommendations, you guys. We start with Josh, who would give us a movie called
The Kamatti Padam.
And you can watch it on Hotstar.
Yes, for free.
Yeah, and Abbas recommended
Siege of Mecca by Yaroslav Trofimov.
Yes, it's a book. You can buy it in a bookstore. And I recommended The Keepers. It's on Netflix. You should check it out and get your mind blown. Alright, so that's the round of recommendations. We'll be back after a short break and we'll discuss book to movie adaptations.
What's the best new restaurant in town?
Which bar sucked?
What's the worst new Hindi film?
What's the most obscure thing to do on the weekend?
And what's the most interesting new walking tour?
If you want to know how to make the most of Bombay, listen to the podcast by thedailypow.com. We are Pronuti,
Amit,
And Purva.
We're your guide to what to do, see, and eat in the city. You can find new episodes of the podcast every Monday on the IVM Podcast app or any other podcasting app that you prefer, and on thedailypow.com.
Alright, welcome back to IVM Likes. Here I am with Josh and Abbas, and we just gave our round of recommendations. Pretty intense stuff if you want to check it out. But before we go to the next round, we had a discussion last week on IVM Fights. Josh and I had a discussion, where, not a discussion, more like a debate. Yeah,
a debate,
where we discussed if Lord of the Rings is better as a book or as a film series. Yeah. And
do you check it out?
Yeah, and I think Josh actually won hands down.
I wouldn't pretty much.
Because my whole angle was it was personal for me. Like I just wouldn't spend that much time. But today we'll discuss like our favorite books and our favorite book adaptations that made it to celluloid, and if they made sense in the long run, and then we'll discuss if the format generally is better or what exactly. So Abbas, why don't you?
Okay, so I'll basically start with my favorite book to film adaptation. It's gonna sound a little cliche, but it's The Godfather. In fact, I'll go a step further and say The Godfather movie is better than the book, because I think just as an artist, Francis Ford Coppola is a better director than Mario Puzo is a writer. Mario Puzo's writing style is very like he tells us what's happening one after the other, and it's engaging in itself, and he's written some very iconic characters, but I would say they were brought to life on celluloid. They breathed the life that those actors breathed into those characters on screen is gonna be what's gonna live on for a really long time after the book. I think more than the book, I would say. So for me, The Godfather is definitely one, if not the most iconic book to film transition. The other one I would say is also Trainspotting, because I would disagree. The book definitely, like, because the movie is amazing, hands down, such a beautiful movie, and I've watched it like a billion times by now. But the book has, like, you delve into their lives more. The psyche of the characters is so much more explored, right?
And that is greatly done by Danny Boyle. But where you really get to know the characters is in the nitty-gritties of it.
Okay.
Like, there's a lot that gets left out. The only problem with the movie is that a lot of it couldn't get transition from page to the
maybe
movie.
The problem with me for the book was that it was written in that Scottish accent.
Yeah.
It was in Scottish English,
but it's
and
like Irvin Welsh usually, like,
he does that. Yeah, that's
that.
true. But I couldn't get into the book as much as the movie just hooked me on right from the first frame itself.
Yeah, choose life.
Choose life.
Choose life.
This is us doing our favorite Scottish impersonations. So what about you guys? What are some of your favorite book to film adaptations? I
am a big Stephen King fan, but more than his horror stuff, I usually enjoy the more the kiddie kind of stuff.
Right.
And The Body is a famous book of his where he talks about these 4 kids who in the summer of their puberty go exploring a dead body which someone's heard has been found. And the body is just an excuse for them to get away for a weekend, and they essentially explore their friendship and life and what happened with them in the past. And they're still kids, but like how it is for you when you're transitioning from that small adolescent age to now trying to become the kid your family wants you to be, or the student your teachers want you to be, and all that. So The Body was a book I read when I was 13, I think.
Okay.
And I did not have a hard copy of the book. Surprisingly, my sister, for her art assignment, she had done like Xerox of the book.
Okay.
And I read that. Okay. And years later, I found Stand By Me, directed by Rob Reiner, which is adaptation of that book. And I cried. I literally cried so much because there's so much depth in that movie, which is just out of the pages. The characters are out of the pages. The end is so beautifully done. We have Kiefer Sutherland in the movie, and we also have River Phoenix, who's Joaquin Phoenix's deceased brother.
Yeah.
And we also have Will Wheaton of Star Trek fame. over there. So yeah, I think The Body and Stand By Me, very faithful adaptation and very well done. That's for me the best ever adaptation ever.
Best adaptation. So I haven't really thought of what the best adaptation is, but one that I really like is there's this 1969 film adaptation of In Cold Blood. Now, if you've read, this is a book by
Truman Capote book.
Yeah, and I had read the book only after I saw that film. But that film is just it's in black and white, and it's a very captivating film. And the guy who acts in it is this guy, Robert Blake, who has since been like tried for murder, like in the 90s, which is bizarre, really. But so the film, I mean, the story is the same story as the book, and it's about like a murder that happens, and these two killers that sort of go on the run, and no one understands why these people kill this family, and it's just an interesting sort of reflection of where that impulse comes from, you know.
There have been multiple adaptations of the
there have been biopics of like Capote, and which kind of like weaves his, because the thing is, while he was there's a whole section of the book, like the second half, where before the guys are hung. And all that section, Capote was part of that, but in the book he's kept himself out. So I think subsequent adaptations have included him in that part of the story. But this film is just a very captivating film, and it's like the style of it, the editing. And I wouldn't say it's better than the book, but because I would still say if you watch the film to read the book, because the book is like just a deeper reflection of that same kind of thing. But I think the film is a very good adaptation of the book.
Another adaptation that I'd like to mention is, and I'll try and get your views on this as to what exactly makes a faithful adaptation. But John le Carre wrote a book called Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, right? Now there was a mini series based on that book. Somewhere I think 1978 or 79, starring Alec Guinness, and it is the most faithful adaptation I have seen of a book. Like every word, every dress, everything that has been described in the book is exactly adapted in a miniseries. Very good miniseries. I recommend
that's also John le Carre's writing style.
Yeah.
You can't really.
Yeah, but then very recently in 2011 or 12, a movie was made, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, starring Gary Oldman. Now, if you compare the two of them, the movie, it's almost like the movie has been squeezed out of all the stuff that happens off screen in the book.
Yeah.
That was very interesting to me, because that's the directors and the writers' way of thinking.
They had more espionage in their
exactly,
in their mind,
and so much time had passed. It's almost like they have, it was very unique.
It's like fan fiction almost.
Kind of, yeah, but very authentic fan fiction. Like the author would be proud of this fan fiction, because it's like it's still coming from the same source material. So for you guys, what is more important, that everything should be exactly as it is described in the book, or the filmmakers can take a liberty as long as I get the sense of the story?
Liberty for sure, man.
Yeah?
Yeah, I agree with that. Like there should not be like very little translation to the film, because it's a different medium altogether. And that's why I respect the Harry Potter movies so much as well, because they took their liberties with the stories and they actually nailed it, in many regards. Like the Prisoner of Azkaban itself, like the time turner concept to bring it on film was much more difficult in hindsight, but now they've done it better. What I like, because Alfonso Cuarón also did like a lot of
Prisoner of Azkaban for sure was one of those standouts in the movie, among the movies. But there were other choices that they took that I didn't quite appreciate as much.
Like,
so I have, like in Order of the Phoenix, they just cut the action to Hogwarts very soon, whereas there's a lot of stuff that happened before they moved to Hogwarts, about how Dumbledore's army was set up, how things were when the first war happened, those kind of things. So
so like you can excuse them that, because then they have to tell the story. Like you can't forgive when Half-Blood Prince, when they like skip so much of Voldemort's history, when essentially that's the whole build up to the finale.
But so I would say that, because like Harry Potter, there are a lot of details. But if you take something like V for Vendetta, which we were talking about, like I thought the graphic novel definitely has so much more like depth again. It has so much more depth to it. But I feel like the film also raises those questions. Like you still reflect on the same kind of issues in your brain. that in your head when you watch the film. So I felt like the film kind of did the same thing that the graphic novel did for me, but just in like the film form.
Like,
but it was nothing like the graphic novel.
Yeah, so like Zack Snyder gets a lot of hate for Watchmen.
Yeah.
But I genuinely enjoy both in their own respective quantities. You know what I'm saying? Like, eventually what the book is capturing, the essence of like who watches the Watchmen, is there in the movie. If you look at it like well enough, like it's obviously the idea.
But what killed Watchmen for me was that sex scene with Hallelujah. That's what killed it.
That was the most awkwardest sex scene.
That finished the movie for me. Like he's destroyed it.
Yeah.
He really destroyed it.
And they're throwing flamethrowers 1 second and next they're like, oh wow, we just did that with our spaceship, so let's
with Watchmen, I don't hate the movie, but again it's one of those where yes, Zack Snyder went to the length of capturing each panel exactly how it was, but there's something missing. It doesn't have the same impact.
It doesn't. I was only excited to see the Dr. Manhattan sequences, man, honestly, in the cinema, because that had scale, you know. And even because the ending thing just happens in Antarctica and is almost like anticlimactic.
More like Dr. Mandongle.
Okay then.
But
okay, I have a question to ask. Can a film be better than the book?
Yeah, I think it's possible. I just haven't come across one.
Okay.
Oh, I can't think of one
me
right
neither.
now. Yeah.
So what would a movie have to do in order to be better than the book? You say you haven't come across one yet.
I don't, because books have so much, like if you take Harry Potter, just for example, like imagine there were no films.
Right.
Like the whole visualization of just the merchandise, if you think about it, would be a completely different thing versus when you see it in a film. You know?
That's true. The film sets it in stone.
Yeah, it kind of gives it it grounds it in a kind of way that, okay, that is the thing. But then when you're reading a book, it's a very personal kind of imagining of
that's why. So like when most of the books become films, the hype is not about this is becoming like the story and all takes a backseat, but more like who's going to get cast for this role. I wonder who's going to be this person and that person. So it becomes that. I think that should go away. I think the eventual crux of it should be what the book is trying to say, and does the movie capture the essence of it? The idea behind the whole shouldn't be lost in translation because it's trying to be so cool. Like Aragon, for example, the books are pretty chill and it's fun read, but the movie is so disgusted by the movie. Never really made another one.
I was actually on a screenwriting. I was watching a screenwriting panel once, and Suni Tarapurwala was on the panel, who wrote the screenplay for Salaam Bombay, and The Namesake had just come out. So they were asking her about, because it was adapted from a Jhumpa Lahiri novel. So she said said there's a particular term which stuck with me. She said when you're adapting a book into a movie, you should make sure that the spiritual DNA of the book is transferred onto the film, and that's something that stuck with me. That spiritual DNA is a very very unique term.
Cool. So that's it. The discussion is now coming to a close, and we discussed about books and movie adaptations, and as long as they capture the spiritual DNA, I think we're sorted that way. And that brings us to the end of another IVM Likes, you guys. If you like to listen to this, do check us out on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram via IVM Podcasts, and do send us your recommendations and your suggestions for general episodes in the future. And that's it from us. Say bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. Sorry to say, but there's been a slight delay due to the apocalypse having suddenly begun. As you can see, there's death, destruction, and chaos taking place all around us. But don't you worry, food and drinks will be served shortly, and I would recommend checking out IVM Podcasts to get some of your favorite Indian podcasts. We'll keep you going till this whole thing blows over. Thank you.